That was amazing. Thank you so much, Sarah. Before I call the next speaker, I want to say two short things. One, I want to give a shout out to the best moderator that I've ever had the pleasure to work with, Mr. Meni Barzilai. So please, hats off. Amazing, really, really amazing. It's daunting to come up on stage after Meni. Let me take a breath. Mr. Lieberman, I actually also saw the movie Field of Dreams, and I love that movie, and I love that quote, but there's another quote that I love from that movie. And that is when shoeless Joe Jackson asks Ray, he says, "Is this heaven?" And Ray answers, "No, it's Iowa." And yeah, and to take that analogy further, this isn't heaven, this is Israel, but it is cyber heaven. And taking from the theme of if you build it, they will come, people have been working very hard in the last 20 somewhat years to build this place, which really is cyber heaven. It's really an example of how a small country with very few resources can really build something exceptional that becomes a lighthouse, becomes an inspiration to the whole world. Yeah, I just danced on stage. That will never die. This will be an internet meme one day. So I'm gonna get out of here as fast as I possibly can. So one of those companies and one of these people, the specific individuals who built this great powerhouse that we call today Cyber Nation is, of course, Checkpoint. Within Checkpoint, the person who was from day one, if I'm not mistaken, responsible for building Checkpoint products is the moderator of the next session, which is going to talk about redefining industry protection. Please join me in welcoming on stage Dr. Dorit Dor, the Vice President of Products from Checkpoint.
Hi, everyone. There is a clicker, yes. Very good. So, my name is Dorit Dor. I've been at Checkpoint 24 years. I manage the R&D for Checkpoint since we were 15 people. And today I manage the R&D products, business development and corporate development. So in many, many ways, it's really a pleasure to stand here and talk about how is the evolution. There are slides? Yes, very good. So, does it show? Something is happening? Never mind. It's my picture. I'm so beautiful. Okay. So it's my pleasure to talk about how the industry protection is shaping its way. And I think that it's very clear that the industry of attacks is going a long way, the industry of IT, and even sometimes moving faster in technology and innovation. And it's our challenge to always be ahead of the curve and always understand them, because that's what we have to live with. So let's look at any attack. And what's so interesting about the presentation that was before me, he spoke about if we build them, if we build it, they will come. And I have this on my slide from before as well. And we talked about physical attacks and cyber attacks, and they all come together. And the way any attack is being built is by somebody who has a motivation, somebody has the means, and somebody has the opportunity to attack. And as industry protector, we're trying to find our ways and to have the industry protection on top of that. And that would actually be the topic of our panel. We will not so much speak about the motivation today. We would speak more about the means, the opportunities, and how the industry protects itself. And as the first speaker, I'll do most of the kind of introduction to the rest of the session, and my main focus will be about the means. So if I look at the means are evolving and are using every tool of IT that exists out there. Every innovation of IT that comes is also used at the attacker hands. And if the IT moved to open source, to supply chain, to SaaS services, so does the attackers. And that's a great tool because it moves them very fast forward and it lets them leverage even nation-state level cyber tools and other things that gets exposed in the open source world, etc. So I'll devote some of my time to explaining one of the ways to analyze it, and that's with DNA of attacks, DNA of malware, DNA of software, and I'll give a taste of how we do this in the very short time I have. But if I want to look at the supply chain, it actually starts from the ability to use open source, both by the developers of the ITs in the world and by the attackers. And one of the things realized by the attackers is that if the developers of the world are using open source, why don't they use this open source to inject their attacks? So one famous story is about an attacker that want to attack the world of the cloud. So what he did, he looked for an open source tool, became a reviewer of that tool, an approver of code of that tool. He looked for a tool where there aren't many reviewers, but there is activity. So quickly enough, he became reviewer and approver of source code of the tool. And then he started to approve his own kind of intentions, like Bitcoin mining into that source code. And then everybody who leveraged that source code, that was a legitimate source code used by the industry, started to run his cryptocurrency mining capabilities. So you don't necessarily have to be external. You could inject yourself internal into the supply chain. But if we look at the supply chain as a whole, it's built from open source. I could take open source tools in the industry. I could take DLLs. I could take Dockers. I use repos that are not mine because I use this all industry innovation. And if the industry innovation includes some bad guys injecting themselves and disguising themselves, I use them too. With that in mind, we wanted to see how to protect that, how to analyze that. And I think we should understand when talking about attacks in the industry, there are 3 levels of tools. There are the script kiddies. They take what's in there. They do a very minor manipulation, and that's done. That's the known kind of things. Many people know how to defend the known kind of things, even though the industry doesn't always protect against them. The more advanced stuff is, the cyber industry of attackers. They are much more sophisticated than the script kiddies. They know not to take the tools as they are. They know to create variants in behaviors, variants in the way the tool is evading the system in which it is. And the thing I wanted to touch on today is DNA. So we've started to use an analysis of the tools through kind of a DNA analysis. So we're taking the tools, we look at the different ingredients in the tools, and we flag them as a DNA, we cluster them, and we try to understand each cluster, where did it came from. It could come from a known operation, it could come from a known good, it could come from something that came from the industry, and you could learn a lot from clustering behaviors of components of this open source and understanding really the ingredient of attack. And you could come to the level where you could see this is 60% X or 70% Y. And actually with this tool, among the 86 billion questions we get a day to our threat cloud, we are able to find 7,000 zero days every day. So this is something we use in order to create visibility, but with this visibility, we could create the visibility that is most relevant, the visibility of behaviors and how it's relevant to other behaviors, the visibility of the actions that something bad is doing. Here I demonstrate it on a malware, but you could demonstrate it elsewhere. To finish up, to this open source world come injecting the kind of the biggest innovator in this space, which is the cyber nations. They innovate attack tools, very advanced attack tools, and their attack tools become the next capabilities. So if we build them, they will come. The next presentation will talk about the edge of things, IoTs, where everything is not just compute and network, it's all connected. And the next speaker will talk about how you could attack this framework. So we are moving from means to opportunities, and then we will talk about prevention, and I'm proud